Welcome to today's session. Our topic is choline, the smart baby nutrient that matters early. We are excited to dive into this conversation and share practical, evidence-based guidance you can actually use in your real life. And I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Shannon. Shannon is a registered dietitian with expertise in maternal care. She currently lives in Maine, but she began her nutrition career in Boston, Massachusetts in the clinical setting, working with both inpatient and outpatient populations with special focus in the endocrinology department. She's worked extensively with mother-of-fact patients navigating gestational diabetes and high-risk pregnancies, and she's passionate about supporting families with practical, compassionate nutrition care. And we're so grateful to have her on the Mother-of-Fact team and excited for her to share her expertise today. So with that, Shannon, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. Love everything you're saying, and introducing Mother of Fact is awesome to be sharing all of our knowledge with everyone. So, choline is a super amazing topic, and I'm happy to be talking about it today because I feel it is super important for those trying to conceive, as well those in pregnancy and beyond. And I find that when I talk with a lot of my clients and patients, that not many people have heard of it before. So I'm happy to kind of give some guidance on, what it is, why we need it, and how to incorporate it through our diet. So, starting off on the agenda, what we'll be covering today, so kind of understanding what choline is, the role that it does have, and especially in early brain development during pregnancy. We'll talk a little bit about the role of choline in preconception, fertility, those trying to conceive, and why it's important, especially before the pregnancy is confirmed or, known about. We can dive in a little bit about what we recommend, so how to make sure that you're getting enough in your day through your dietary intake, and maybe if there's any gaps, how to kind of know when to add in a supplement, and reviewing different food sources, such as from animal-based, plant-based, and as well as how to kind of make sure you're reaching what you do need in your day with different supplements and knowing how to choose the best one for yourself. So starting off, we'll do a little review of understanding choline and what it is. So it is a very important nutrient. It's not technically a vitamin, but it has lots of great functions for the body. So your body does not produce enough in in the day itself for what you need. That's why including different sources through your dietary intake is really important, necessary just to meet all the physiological needs, especially during pregnancy. So choline is really helpful for that cell membrane that we have within our bodies, making sure that there's proper function and integrity of the cell membrane. Also helpful for producing acetylcholine, which is critical for memory, mood, and muscle control. There's important roles for choline as well in gene expression and DNA different synthesis processes, as well as lipid transport. So these are going to be some good fats. So definitely transporting those healthy fats and cholesterol from the liver throughout the body. So all these roles really make choline important during that rapid fetal development. So what does choline do in pregnancy? So it definitely has a very important part in early brain structure development. So when the hippocampus is formed, that's the region that is responsible for memory and learning. When that is formed in the early fetus, it's really important that we have choline to make sure everything is going according to plan to set the fetus up for great memory function and learning as they continue to develop. We want to make sure that it's contributing to the neural tube support. So I know we had talked a little bit at our previous webinar about preconception nutrition. Incorporating folate is a very important nutrient. So choline works hand in hand with folate to really support the neural tube formation and closure, which is getting the baby set up for great brain and spinal function. Choline also is really helpful with the placenta, so that's what is really helpful for transporting nutrients to the fetus. So making sure that the placenta has everything that it needs and is formed properly to be helpful for the baby. and as well as helping support liver function to prevent fatty liver and really support the maternal metabolic health during pregnancy. And the really important thing too is to notice that choline is helpful, especially like in the early parts of pregnancy, especially when people maybe aren't quite sure they're pregnant yet or haven't taken a test yet. So that's why it's really helpful in the early days to kind of make sure all these, functions that are happening really rapidly are all utilizing choline. So, as we just touched upon, looking at why it's really important to incorporate choline, especially in the early pregnancy, is this is a really important development window for the neural tube formation, brain structure development, especially when people maybe haven't taken a pregnancy test yet. Choline is often, not talked about, and I feel like a lot of people, when I bring it up in my sessions, they've never heard of it before. So awareness is a little bit on the lower end. So that's why we really want to make sure we're, getting out this message that it's important, and how to make sure that you are including enough in your day. Um, a lot of people, they don't reach the recommended intake levels in their day to day, whether it's, access, barriers, as well as, different food aversions to different food sources of choline. Those can all be factors for, people not getting enough in their day. And potentially also different supplement formulations with prenatals and whatnot that they're not getting that widespread within their day to day. So, touching upon why choline is essential in that preconception, trying to conceive fertility space. So, as we touched upon a little bit earlier, looking at neural tube development. So, as the fetus is forming those neural tubes, and they do close between days 21 and 28 after conception. So, that's about the first month of pregnancy. And people often don't take a pregnancy test until that 28, 30 days. So, it's all happening before we even might know that we're pregnant, which is why it's really important to, get the choline intake started and, within your day to day, starting early before you even are starting to conceive. And looking at gene expression patterns, want to make sure that we're utilizing choline to help with this development early in pregnancy to really help the impact of long-term health outcomes. And as we also touched upon, looking at the brain structure formation, so the hippocampus, to make sure that baby's memory and learning capabilities are going to be up to par, and utilizing all the tools that it needs. So really focusing on early on, incorporating your day to day if you're hoping to be conceiving the near future, and just in general making sure that you're including this really important nutrient in your daily intake. So, looking at what the intake recommendations are and where the gap typically falls with people not reaching what they need. So, looking at women of reproductive age, about 425 milligrams is what we recommend. That does jump up to 450 milligrams per day in pregnancy. And please note that this is the adequate intake. So that is what, we likely would like you to reach, not necessarily the recommended daily allowance. So definitely there is, some different research emerging as we continue to research this nutrient, that we might need more than this potentially for best impact on fetus and development and brain development. So we do see 450 milligrams per day during pregnancy. Some research does show that jump up a little bit, especially in that third trimester when a lot of different development is occurring, to 600 to 1,000 milligrams a day. And then during lactation, if someone chooses to do that to help with milk supply, 550 milligrams per day. So a good portion, and we can dive in a little bit into how to reach that through your food and what that might look like. So, looking at why these needs do increase in pregnancy is because the fetal brain is rapidly growing, and we want to make sure that we can keep up and make sure that it has all the nutrients that it needs to be able to keep up with the growth. As the genes are all forming and developing, you want to make sure that the choline is helpful for that methylation process. And also keeping up with the maternal stores. So as the fetus is utilizing this choline, we want to make sure that the maternal has all that they need in order to be able to keep up with this rapid development to make sure that, both parties in this pregnancy are having enough choline for daily function and utilizing the choline for the placental transfer. So making sure that the circulation levels are higher in the maternal blood, so making sure that we have enough choline to help those mechanisms. So looking at the gap of where this intake can occur. So a lot of pregnant people do not reach the recommended choline intake, so that 450 milligrams per day. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault. There's different things that really can form some barriers, unintentionally. So, like we had mentioned, a lot of lack of awareness, not knowing about it. Folate is often talked a lot, in the early development stages of pregnancy, but not a lot of discussion is with choline. So people just not knowing about it can really be a factor. Different prenatal vitamins often don't contain choline. If they do, it might be, a very small amount, such as like 0 to 55 milligrams, which is a lot less than that 450 milligrams that we recommend per day. Sometimes, high choline rich foods could be cost prohibitive or maybe unavailable in different areas. And then, as well, we mentioned too awareness gap with different healthcare providers as well that might not be addressing it. It might not be built into any conversations. And then different, pregnant people might not, know about it to even ask about it, which is totally, totally fine. So we're hoping to bring some awareness from this discussion today. So, looking at some direct food sources and practical strategies of how we can make sure that we're reaching our choline needs each day. So, very high choline rich foods, a lot come from the animal based foods, although some plant based options do contribute. So, the highest, what we definitely see is beef liver. I do know that this might be tricky for some to eat if they're having any kind of food aversions, if they're not used to cooking beef liver at all. So that might be a harder one to kind of get in your day and day, but if you're open to trying new things, it could be a great thing to incorporate. And I do know sometimes different, ground meat options might incorporate some different organ meats like beef liver. So that could be a good way to kind of hiding it, in what you're eating versus just having liver and onions, which is kind of a, more of an older form of a dinner option. The most typical recommendation that I feel like I review is egg intake because one large egg has about 150 milligrams of choline. So eating, 2 to 3 eggs gets you pretty close to your daily goal. Also, chicken breast, dairy products like eggs, yogurt, and cheese, as well as fish, such as salmon, do contain some good choline rich sources. So, looking at, in your whole day, maybe you're having 2 eggs for breakfast, maybe a portion of chicken for your lunch meal, and a glass of milk as a snack or in your day. That gets you over 400 milligrams a day. So, it definitely is possible, if you're adding up over the course of your meals and your snacks to be able to reach what you do need. And that's just with some animal based options to start. Looking at plant-based options, so soybeans and tofu, quinoa, different vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, mushrooms as well, beans, peanuts, peanut butter. These are some good options, but if you notice, I do have a lot less per serving and making sure that you are having the full serving of those. So looking at a plant-based day, so if maybe you're incorporating a cup of quinoa, with your breakfast. Maybe you're eating a cup of cooked Brussels sprouts for your lunch or your dinner. You're incorporating some tofu, peanuts, beans for your proteins. You would only be reaching, around 260 milligrams. So it's a bit less than the 450 per day. Definitely a great to include and try to incorporate these foods. And we can definitely talk about some ways to kind of help supplement to fill in that gap to make sure that you are reaching what you do need. So eggs, I think they're a great nutritious food to incorporate into your day. They're a great source of choline, great protein source, but sometimes it can be hard to incorporate into your day if there are any kind of symptoms, food aversions, nausea, vomiting, especially in that first trimester of pregnancy. Because ideally, if you could eat 2 to 3 eggs a day, that would be wonderful, and you'd be, right at your target for your choline. But sometimes that's not the case, and just different things to consider, like different cultures, religious reasons might not be, utilizing eggs in their day to day. Maybe the price of eggs, they definitely, do fluctuate. And then recently we've had, some increase in egg prices, and it just did not seem practical to be purchasing on a weekly basis. Um, and there are ways to include other foods into your day to meet your choline needs without, relying solely on eggs every single day. And also your needs and what you sounds good to you, and what you want to be eating might not look the same every single day. You might want some variety, and that's totally fine. But definitely, eggs are a great source, and when you can include them, we always recommend to go ahead. But got to think about some other options too to keep some variety into your day. So, if you are incorporating some different choline-rich foods, but maybe you're not able to fully reach that 450 milligrams, definitely there are some options to supplement to make sure that you're incorporating ways to get there. So trying to think about, ways that you could be including your choline. So some prenatals might contain them, some might not contain sources of choline. So I always recommend checking the label and finding out for sure. I have seen a few brands coming out with almost like a combo pack. Like they might have like their generic prenatal, and then they are selling like it's almost like attached to it at the store, an additional choline supplement. So that way, someone knows to purchase both, and they're kind of included at the same price, but it's not within the same pill or capsule. It might be an additional one that would be recommended to take with the prenatal, which I like the awareness of. And I think it's helpful for someone to understand that, it's an important nutrient, and here's an additional source of it, because maybe they weren't able to, include it in the ingredients of like their original formula. And different forms of choline you might see on the packaging. The CDP choline is definitely most absorbable, so just kind of keep that in mind if you are browsing for a choline supplement in the store. Just kind of looking to see on the back what kind of form that is in the supplement, and looking at the different dosages. So, trying to keep in mind too, if you have a prenatal that you already are utilizing, you have plenty in stock, go ahead and keep taking that. And maybe you'd want an additional choline, standalone supplement to kind of add to what you're already having in addition to your food sources. So really trying to, work with your provider, talk with your dietitian to find what the best supplemental dose might be for yourself, to make sure that you're not having too much, but you're reaching for what you need. And it might be coming from a different, couple different sources in your day to day. So definitely we do recommend trying to optimize your food intake with choline supplements, seeing what's in your prenatal, and then maybe adding on an additional choline standalone supplement if needed. But definitely talk with your healthcare provider or dietitian about what might be the best option for yourself. So for safety, there is an upper limit. So we want to make sure that you're not exceeding 3,500 milligrams per day. So definitely, always want to be aware of any kind of side effects. If like on accident, maybe you were over supplementing, or your prenatal had more than you thought, or you're taking more than you thought, and an additional supplement on top of what you're eating. So a fishy body odor, any kind of like GI issues, stomach issues, nausea, vomiting, excessive sweating. So keep an eye out for these. Let your doctor know if anything does come up for you. And the side effects are really rare if you are continuing to have the recommended 450 milligrams. It might just happen to happen if you're, taking additional supplements, without any kind of guidance, and you're end up taking more than you originally had thought. So always, review what you're taking, review with your providers, and try to find, the best combination that works for you. So some different structural barriers for, getting enough intake of choline overall. There's things to think about. So the food costs, so looking at, what your budget is in your week to see, what different foods you might be able to incorporate. Maybe each week will look a little different. Maybe you'll choose to purchase eggs one week, focus more on different meat, fish, and dairy sources the next week to make sure that you're able to utilize what you have for a food budget, but to try to incorporate these high choline rich foods. Um, Thinking about if you do receive any kind of government assistance, check to see what your benefits entail. I do know that, WIC does provide eggs, but coverage might differ from state to state. So, try to look to see, what you have access to and try to make it work, within like your day to day to incorporate a good amount of choline. Um, Education, there definitely can be a gap there. So, if you, can advocate for yourself and, talk about choline with your healthcare provider and ask for more information, education with your dietitian can be an awesome option as well to make sure that it is coming front of mind. Um, Different supplement affordability options. So every, product out there definitely has different costs associated with it, just as well as food does. So to really try to weigh your options out and see what works best for your budget and what you have available. And then looking at food access as well, this can be definitely a barrier, develop depending where you live and what access you have to different foods. So utilizing, all the different options for choline-rich things if they are fresh food versus more packaged products such as like beans. And really adjusting, what works for you and your different dietary restrictions, cultural considerations, and things that you just have food preferences for and foods that you enjoy the taste of. So I included a nice little sample day. So two options here for, a mixed diet if you're using both plant-based and animal-based foods, as well as a plant-forward example of a day of eating to see how much choline could potentially be in your day. So for the more animal-based diet example. So we're including some eggs for breakfast, some grilled chicken for lunch with some broccoli on the side, a dairy source snack, some yogurt, and dinner we're having some salmon for some fish paired with some quinoa and some Brussels sprouts. So this does put you over, the adequate intake of 450 milligrams. You're closer to 700 milligrams, which is totally okay. As potentially your portions could be a little bit different than this, but kind of a simple guideline to see different things to include to reach that over the course of the whole day. Looking at the plant forward option, so we're using oatmeal that contains some wheat germ with some peanut butter, utilizing kidney beans and quinoa and broccoli for lunch, peanuts, as well as some hummus and vegetables as a snack, and then some tofu and Brussels sprouts with dinner. So this puts us a bit closer, which is not too off of our recommended daily total. So we're closer to 400 milligrams. So maybe we'd have to add in a small supplement here, maybe included in your prenatal or an additional supplement to put you over to make sure you're reaching the daily recommendation. So here are some examples. You can definitely substitute with things that you like and different recipes that you commonly have, but just an example of how to try to reach your choline needs in a day. So a couple key takeaways for, incorporating choline and making sure that you're aware of the benefits. So really trying to increase that choline intake as early as possible. If it is in your fertility space, looking to trying to conceive soon, early development, just to really help with that brain development, the neural tube formation, often, before that pregnancy is confirmed. So really thinking of that preconception space. Thinking about how a lot of pregnant people do not reach their choline needs. So definitely the more awareness is important to make sure that we're reaching the goals that we need to help our body and the fetus. Um, Aiming to try to use food first as possible as you can when you're planning out your meals and your grocery shopping. So trying to include both animal and plant-based choline-rich sources and really having a nice variety over the course of your different meal plannings and things that you're looking out to include in your day-to-day. And also it's totally okay to add in the supplements through a prenatal or a standalone choline supplement to make sure that we are getting all the choline that we need in our day. And as best we can, trying to, bring early awareness. So even if that's you bringing up and advocating for yourself at your doctor visits, or looking into, talking with a registered dietitian about how you can increase your choline based on what you're eating in your day to day to make sure that you're starting incorporating this as early as possible. So that comes to the end of our presentation. So here are our different contacts. So please do check out our social media and please let us know if you have any questions or concerns about anything. So this can be found here.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you so much, Shannon. Yeah. We've got a couple of questions, and so for anybody that's on the call right now, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute your mic and just shout it out. But I'll go ahead and get started with our first question from Abby. Any recommendations about getting choline while you're nauseous in the first trimester? And it's kind of connected to another question we had come in. What are some ways we can incorporate eggs, so a choline-rich source of nutrition, when we've kind of like got the ick about eggs or we're having some sort of aversion to eggs? So I think that's probably pretty common in the first trimester. So similar questions.
Yeah, no, great question. And I do feel like this comes up a lot because sometimes when I talk with my patients and clients about eating eggs, sometimes them are like, "Oh, I can't even smell eggs being cooked. Like I can't even stomach them. Like maybe they tried them when they were early on, having some nausea, and it just really didn't settle well in their belly." So definitely, there are ways to make sure that we are able to just try a variety of different recipes. So sometimes I'll recommend incorporating it into different foods. So maybe if you're making some homemade pancakes, you can put in some eggs, some banana, some oats, and that way you're able to kind of use it in a different form. Or in different recipes. So maybe trying like a fried rice or a stir fry or a pad thai, or maybe you're scrambling some eggs into that dish, but it's not the main focus. And you have some other flavors in there that are going to help you better tolerate it. And trying different forms of egg. So maybe a scrambled egg or a hard-boiled egg is just not it, but maybe something like a quiche, where you kind of can mix in other flavors as well. Like maybe you can mix some potatoes in, some vegetables, or some, sausage, and that is going to really help you kind of have some other flavors and textures to those eggs. Um, and then again, maybe if you're leaning on more of a supplement in the first trimester, if none of those options work for you, that's okay. I'm always a proponent of like, trying something. If it doesn't work, totally fine. Then reintroducing it maybe in a couple weeks, maybe if you're having some improvement in your symptoms. Because sometimes people, can love eggs in their third trimester, but they couldn't, be in the same room as them first trimester. So it really depends on the person.
That's great advice, Shannon. Thank you. We just got a couple more questions come in. So, oh, Abby said, I've done French toast too, and there's at least one in egg in there that's pretty hidden. So that's a great way to hide eggs as well. French
Oh
toast.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Put a
good
little
idea, Abby.
put a little fruit, put a little maple syrup on there. You'll never know there's an egg. Okay, we got a couple more questions in, one from Shakira. So, is it too late for me to start taking choline? I'm 26 weeks, approaching my third trimester. What's your advice for that?
No, it's never too late. I think wherever you are is a great spot to be to, make some different changes. So I think, definitely utilizing some of the different ways and food sources we reviewed in this um, webinar can kind of help maybe increase, what you're having for food sources and similar trying to see, what you are having in your prenatal. Then maybe if, adding on a supplement could be a good option for yourself. But, if you're able to tolerate eggs, maybe, try to get some eggs on the menu for the next week and see how you go and then incorporate a couple other choline rich foods too. But no, it's never too late to start. I think wherever you are, it's great to make sure you're incorporating this important nutrient.
Yeah, that's great advice too. And Shakira, if it's been a while since you've taken a look at your prenatal, because I know we'll often like get them at the beginning of pregnancy and then just kind of take them without thinking about them for a while. Do just check on the back on the list of ingredients in your prenatal. You may have a prenatal vitamin that has choline in it, and you didn't even realize or maybe didn't remember. So you may have been getting some in this whole time. But yeah, great advice, Shannon. We've got ooh, here's an excellent question comment from Shira. Since we have such amazing research to support choline in pregnancy, why is it not incorporated in every prenatal at a minimum of 450 milligrams? Excellent question.
Yeah, great question. And to me, it baffles me too. I think I'm a very proponent of, evidence and research and, what we can do to help. And I do think that a lot of focus has been on folate, which is a very important nutrient as well. And it's, incorporated in pretty much every prenatal that I've seen. And I think that just as people are just becoming more aware, talking about choline rich the importance of it in pregnancy and what it can do to fetal brain development. Now, companies are starting to kind of think about, okay, how can we maybe adapt the formula of their prenatal, and offer that additional add-on to their brand, what they're offering. But I agree. I think that it should be highlighted a lot more and talked about a lot more. I love to see it more at different providers' offices and whatnot, talking about it and highlighting how you can incorporate it. Um, so I think that, the great things to come, but it would be awesome if we could make sure it is highlighted, because it is so important.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those examples of as more research comes out, more patients are educating themselves and they're asking companies, hey, why aren't you doing this thing that we know is good for us? And so gradually companies are starting to answer the call. But a comment from Chacha here, it responding to that question, choline is a large nutrient, so it can be kind of hard to like physically fit into the formulations for most prenatals. And I think probably it's also a little bit expensive to do that for prenatals as well. So that might be why we're seeing that it's not in all prenatal supplements. Here is another question from Shakira. Why isn't choline talked about at any prenatal appointments? Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think we're we're here with you. We want to bring awareness to it, and I always try to talk about it with my clients that I work with because I think that it is so important to include, and education, and just to bring awareness to other providers that are in the prenatal space is super important. So I mean, I think it's so great that you're here learning, and definitely a good thing to bring up at your next visit too, to say, hey, do you guys have any resources for me or anything to help me, learn more about choline and see what they have. And, the more we talk about it, hopefully the more people will, have it come to mind and incorporate into all care.
Yeah, great point. I will say that dietitians, we know what's up. We've always been interested in choline, and which is why we are a valuable part of the clinical team because we aren't experts in what your doctors are experts in, but they may not be experts in what we're experts in. But also, kind of going back to a comment that we got a little bit earlier from Chacha, there's actually been a lot of new research coming out about choline in recent years. So that may also be a reason why choline isn't talked about in prenatal appointments, is that like the actual information, the research wasn't available, maybe when your doctor was doing their training or they were kind of putting together their prenatal sessions. So Chacha said, with all this new research that's coming in, even though the recommended intake during pregnancy is around 450 milligrams, there's a lot of good research that suggests that a higher intake of choline, especially during the third trimester, of around 900 to 1,000 milligrams is optimal for fetal brain development, cognition, memory, etc. What do you generally recommend to patients, and do you have any guidance regarding those higher intakes?
Yeah, definitely. I really do try to hit upon, increasing choline intake in that third trimester, as general as I can be. I mean, it's pretty tricky because every person's different. So sometimes people do see changes to their appetite. So maybe they don't want to be eating like the volume of, 5 or 6 eggs a day or, affordability to try to reach it through food alone. So it might just be a way that, if you can't, over the course of your day, if maybe you're getting full quicker, as baby's taking up more room, maybe it's hard to, eat full, those full multiple cups of cooked vegetables and in addition to the protein-rich eggs in those large volumes. So maybe it would be time to kind of rely more on a supplement, but definitely depends on the person, what their appetite, hunger, food preferences are, access as well as affordability. So kind of, could be a variety of all through food or through supplementation, but trying to include higher amounts in that third trimester, I do recommend often.
Excellent. Shira just commented about kind of the lack of information about choline and the lack of choline's presence in many common prenatal supplements. She said, because I see more and more often about choline, but often the amount of choline in the prenatal is as low as 40 milligrams, which is, of course, nowhere near what the recommendation is. So there's a little bit of chatter about how marketing can be really deceiving, but it's important to be an informed consumer and not just take at face value what's on the front of the container, but always turn it around, read the back, whether that's supplements or food.
I know it is so tricky, and that's why sometimes like it seems silly when if I'm on a call with the patient, I'm like, "Oh, what prenatal are you having?" And I'll say, "Well, go get it. Let's look at it together." Because I do feel like the front marketing, all the different things it could be highlighting, like contains iron and folate and choline, but really knowing what's in that specific one can be really helpful to make the whole picture make sense. Because having the education and knowing what to look for is the other half of it to make sure that you're getting what you want and knowing how to adjust to make sure you're meeting your body's needs. But marketing is really tricky because yeah, they included it, they're right, but it's just not exactly what we're looking for in your day to day.
Exactly. It's not an overt lie, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily all the information that is really available. We
Mhm.
had a couple other questions that came in earlier. One, I really like this about food benefits. So this question asks, in my state, WIC only covers 1 dozen eggs a month. What suggestions do you have to help make sure I can meet my choline needs with a limited income or more limited resources?
Yeah, no, great question. And I do think that, if you're thinking about, if I'm rattling off, say, yeah, have 3 eggs a day, you go through that, dozen of eggs, in just short of a week. So, trying to think about, what best fits your financial options, what you have access to. I mean, I think any choline that you can get in is awesome. I do think that, every situation's different, thinking about, what you have access to, your support. So thinking about, utilizing maybe some other options that you can use from WIC, using the peanut butter, using the beans, so other ways to help increase your choline status if it might not be necessarily from eggs alone, because there's it's not humanly possible to stretch that that one carton and reach 3 eggs a day for over the course of 30 days. So really doing the best that you can and utilizing the resources that you have and, using, the knowledge that you're learning today to, use some other choline rich options to help boost your day to day.
Excellent. Great advice. I think those are all the questions that we have, but I actually have a question and I would love to ask the audience. So Shannon mentioned that beef liver or liver in general is one of the richest sources of choline in the world of food. So I'm curious, does anybody actively eat liver or did you eat liver at all growing up? Whether that's like beef liver, chicken liver is also really popular. Sometimes pork liver is common in the US. So anyway, feel free to comment in the comment section or even take your microphone off and chime in. Do you eat liver or have you eaten liver or is that just insane? Chacha says no liver for me. I actually ate liver yesterday. So, oh, boudin. Okay. All right. So I feel like that's a Louisiana recipe. Is that right? And I think it has something to do with organ meats and it's kind of a stew, if I'm remembering correctly. Feel free to correct me here. Shannon, do you eat liver?
I have tried, I found that I like it like in like different ground meats will contain some beef. You can just cook up, tacos or, whatever else you're using your ground beef for, and it's already in it. But I do find that the taste of plain liver is a little bit strong for me. But it's funny when I used to work at the hospital, a couple of my patients would, if I told them, what foods don't you like? And a lot of them would say liver and onions because maybe they had to eat that growing up or something and it stuck out to them as something that they weren't
Yeah, for
a
sure.
fan of. So it's kind of funny. People have different preferences. Some love it, some can do without.
Yeah. Shira says that chopped liver with onions is a common food in Jewish culture. So yes, she's had it, but mostly on Jewish holidays. And that is like the classic preparation, and that's really delicious. But I think it's quite time consuming to make if I'm understanding the recipe correctly. And Shira says, but getting raw liver and cooking it at home, hard no.
Mhm. Definitely more steps.
Yeah, and so Jenny Lynn said boudin and then like fried boudin balls with rice. So yeah, that's a great way to get in some extra choline. I was saying I actually did have liver yesterday, so I a couple weeks ago made a batch of chicken liver pate. So I was able to get some raw chicken livers and cook it up with I was following a new recipe. I cooked it up with a little bit of like coconut cream from the top of a can and apples and onions and then blended it all up and then portioned out little scoops of it, like little maybe 1 ounce portions, and put it in the freezer. So I can just pull out a couple of little portions and thaw it in the fridge and then eat it with crackers whenever I feel like it. So I would say if you're interested in liver, chicken liver is the way to start because it's definitely less of a strong taste than beef liver. I don't think I can do beef liver unless it's that way you suggested, Shannon, which is where it's like in other ground meat kind of hidden that way.
Well, look at you getting creative in the kitchen. I love it.
Hey,
It sounds like
yeah.
a fun
Well,
snack.
I'm honestly surprised to see so many people who have experience with liver. But thank you guys for chiming in. And those recipes do sound amazing. But also, yeah, getting raw liver and cooking at home, hard no, Shira. I can relate.
Well, yeah, definitely. This is helpful too, because maybe we can make some different social media posts too for highlighting some iron-rich beef liver, chicken liver, choline-rich iron. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah,
Recipes using liver.
exactly, exactly. Well, that's all the questions we have, Shannon. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's all. Thank you everyone for all your questions and joining us today. And looking to see you next month at our next webinar series. We'll be posting that soon.